Today we have all the latest NHL trade and free agent rumor updates for you as we get really close to NHL free agency. Today we're looking at the latest trade talks around guys like Jack Eichel. We're looking at Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner in Vegas. We also have some potential movement between Boston and Seattle, looking at some defensemen. The Canucks are still trying to trade Nate Schmidt. When it comes to free agents, we're talking about all the top names, including Dougie Hamilton, Ryan Suter, Ryan Getzlaf, Phil Danault, and so much more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're taking a look at all the latest rumors as we get close to NHL free agency kicking in tomorrow. So obviously, we're looking at all the latest free agent rumors as well as some trade rumors on some more trades that we likely could see happening here over the next several days. Let's kick things off first with all the latest from the world of free agents. There's all kinds of players with all kinds of speculation around where they're going to end up here. Could we possibly see a scenario where Toronto and Carolina essentially end up swapping goalies, but instead of via trade, it's done through free agency? There's a lot of word right now that the Hurricanes are looking to probably sign Bernier out of the three goalies that they have under their contract right now, only for a couple more days. They've got Bernier, Reimer, and Mrazek. Mrazek is likely heading to market to test the free agency and see what's out there. They don't seem interested in bringing back Reimer, but they do seem interested in signing the newly acquired Jonathan Bernier. So they're working on that, trying to get the deal done, but they're also looking to bring in another veteran to work with him and be a solid 1A, 1B type of tandem is what they're looking for. And it's rumored that one of the guys they're seriously taking a long look at here is Freddie Andersen, soon to be formerly of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Many feel that he's going to price himself out of Toronto. There's pretty much no way, given their cap situation, that he can return. So Carolina could be a likely destination for him. He will have some other options too, but they've been linked to him for a while. And there was even rumors a few years ago that they were very interested in bringing him in. Of course, nothing ever materialized, but that's what could happen now. Now, Peter Mrazek apparently is one of the goalies on the Maple Leafs radar, and he very well could end up signing there as a free agent. They need somebody to work with Jack Campbell in a similar scenario. Of course, Mrazek's contract would have to come in cheaper than Andersen. Otherwise, not really sure there's a whole lot of point in either goalie kind of swapping cities here, but that's kind of the latest in that front. Now, they're both also rumored to be looking at Darcy Kuemper of the Coyotes, who has 1 year left in his contract at a very affordable rate, which the Coyotes could also retain salary on. And that's a deal that we could see. Now, they're not the only teams interested there, and there are some other goalies out there as well. They're not the only ones, but they're the goalies that have been getting the most media attention here in the last 24 hours or so when it comes to those franchises. So we'll have to see what the Leafs and Hurricanes do to address goaltending. It's a big focus for both teams as they get ready for Wednesday. When it comes to the Leafs, a couple other quick tidbits here. Defenseman Zach Bogosian reportedly is not going to be re-signing with the Maple Leafs, so it looks like his 1 year deal that he signed will be just that. It's a one and done scenario, and he'll move on. Likely, mostly in his scenario here, it's because he's obviously an American-born player, lives in the U.S., and because of all the different COVID restrictions and the border not being completely open and all the restrictions, that seems to be the biggest issue for him, is being able to spend more time with family, which you can completely understand. So that's what things are looking like right now in Bogosian. And when it comes to Nick Foligno, most people thought it was a foregone conclusion that he would not return as well. But right now it's looking like there's still a small chance. They're still talking. There hasn't been ruled out that Foligno could return to the Maple Leafs as well. But it pretty much sounds like he will rule out going back to Columbus, which is a bit surprising. But given where that team is heading, it kind of makes sense. I'm not really sure it's really best fit for him anymore at this point in his career, but he could also join his brother Marcus in Minnesota. That's another real likely destination for him if things don't work out to sign a new contract with the Maple Leafs. And I think it's going to be tough. I think he's going to have to take an under-market contract. He's going to take less money to stay there if he does do that for a chance to win. If he feels the Leafs have a better shot at winning than the Wild, well, that might be his decision. But it's going to boil down to what he feels is best for his career, family, winning, working at, balance things out. So we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens. But at this point, it's not ruled out that he could possibly stay with Toronto. Now, it's believed that the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs share interest in a common right shot defenseman that was recently bought out, and that's Tony Deangelo, formerly of the New York Rangers. Now, obviously, Deangelo has his character issues that he's had really for quite some time, dating back to his days in junior in the Ontario Hockey League. He's demonstrated again at the NHL level, but there's no one can really say much about his on-ice play when it comes to being a good puck mover, good offensive generator. Obviously, defensively speaking, he's not the greatest, but if you're looking for somebody to run a power play or generate some offense from the back end, Tony Deangelo is a guy who can help your team out if you're willing to deal with the other stuff that comes off the ice with him. And I guess we'll see what happens here, but I've seen some reporters like Frank Saravalli say that he feels Deangelo could end up in Toronto, and I've heard other reports linking him to Montreal. There were reports linking him to Montreal back at the deadline, before the playoffs, saying that Bergevin and the Habs were trying to acquire him from the Rangers and trying to see what they could do to work out a deal at that point, and it never materialized. So we'll see if they revisit that, especially knowing that Shea Weber is not likely going to be playing this season. I think it's pretty much a given he's out, might not ever play again, and they need to replace him. Now, Deangelo's not anywhere near the type of defenseman Weber is, but he can play some decent minutes and give you some offense. Like I said, if you're willing to do and put up with all the other things that come with him, we'll see what happens. Montreal's also made some other controversial decisions lately, especially at the draft, so I'm not sure what they're going to do here. It seems like they're more concerned with on-ice product than anything else, and that very well could work out for them if that's okay with them. Now, when it comes to another defenseman that the Habs are linked to as well, be a smaller deal, but could be an extra piece for them, would be Chris Weidman, who's returning to the NHL after a stint in the KHL. Now, Weidman, you might think, comes with some issues too, but really, I don't think he does. I mean, he was in the Ottawa Senators organization for a long time, and he was one of the guys at the forefront of that Uber incident a few years ago when they were making fun of one of their assistant coaches and talking about how things were going. Of course, it was a team that was on the decline. It was really struggling. He and Matt Duchene were really the two main culprits in that Uber car that was recorded. There were other guys in there as well that are still with the organization, like Shabbat and White, and some other guys in there. I can't remember everybody that was in the car at the moment, but, those two are still there. But, really, when it comes to who got the brunt of the punishment here, most of it went on Weidman, with Duchene getting a little bit as well. Weidman was pretty much expelled from the organization not long after, bounced around a bit. He went between Pittsburgh and Edmonton, and I think he ended up in Anaheim for a little while. Never really stayed in one place for very long. Went to the KHL last year and really completely rejuvenated his career. It was Defenseman of the Year over there, and it looks like he's going to get another opportunity. I've seen a variety of reports saying that Montreal's expected to sign him probably to a one-year deal worth around $2 million. So he could be a third-pair defenseman. He's not overly big, but he's a good puck mover, and it could be a help or an extra, depth piece for Montreal as well. So I'm not sure that 100% on the Deangelo stuff. Obviously, there's other teams that are rumored to be interested, but Toronto, Montreal, the only teams that are really getting any kind of media play right now around Tony D. So we'll see if either of them end up taking a plunge and taking a chance here on that kind of character player. Now, other defensemen around the NHL right now, looks like Alec Martinez is very likely staying with Vegas. It's reported that they've offered him a 3-year deal at $5 million per season. That's going to be a pretty significant contract for them. I know he's been a big piece for them on that back end, but that is a lot of money. I thought maybe something closer to the $4 million range might be able to get it done, but he pitches in offensively. He's a good, defensively speaking, good shot blocker. So, I understand his value to them. He's been very important, but that is a lot of money, and it's going to put them pretty much right up to the cap. They still have some other players to sign, so they have to make some moves, or at least one or two, to shed some salary and become more cap flexibility here so they can get other stuff done. So you have to think a goalie trade is coming, right? There's been a lot of reports about Fleury and Leonard. Depending on who you talk to, they feel one's being traded over the other. It's really hard to say what they do. I've seen Leonard's name and Fleury's name linked to New Jersey. I've heard Chicago being in the mix, possibly on Fleury on that one-year deal that's left for him. I heard Fleury back to Pittsburgh a while ago, but there hasn't been much on that in a while. So it's really hard to say what happens in Vegas, but this signing kind of pushes them to the point that it kind of forces their hand to get something done. I mean, they can go 10% over the cap during the offseason, so it's not too big a deal on a short-term basis, but before they can go too long here, they need to get some money freed up, and it's the most logical way to get it done. So we'll say that it's a very likely scenario to unfold here, but it's really hard to say which one. I think more people feel Fleury's the more likely player to get moved given his age and the 1 year left on his deal, which would be a lot easier to move. but there are some that feel that it might be better to move Leonard, stick with Fleury, who was the face of your franchise since he became an expansion team. And, maybe they don't trust Leonard after having, a pretty good playoff. But obviously, he had his moments too, like Fleury, that he was really good. But then, his moments when they didn't get the job done in the most important game. But I'm not sure you can really pinpoint that on Leonard. I still get the feeling that McPhee and McCrimmon have more trust in Leonard on a long-term basis. So we'll see. Fleury, to me, was the more logical choice to get moved, even though he's coming off a Vezina Trophy season. I think it's going to be hard for him to keep up those type of numbers. Not to say he couldn't do it, but it will be challenging, and I'm sure there'll be lots of interesting phone calls to try to pry him out of Vegas. When it comes to Dougie Hamilton, he could be one of the higher paid free agent defensemen out there. We talked about New Jersey showing interest and possibly being a big player for Hamilton and other players since they do have tons of cap space. Another team that was brought up as well by NHL insiders was the Nashville Predators. Of course, after making the moves that they've made, they do have some more cap flexibility now too, and he could very well be a nice partner for Roman Josi. Can you imagine a Josi Hamilton pairing? That would really show that the core players left in Nashville that this is not as much of a rebuild as you think. We're really pushing to make this a reset and trying to push forward here. I mean, I've heard David Poile say himself that he didn't consider this a rebuild, but if you look around at what they've done for moves, it kind of looks like one to me, right? I mean, they've traded Ryan Ellis. They let Kyle Yarncroc go in the expansion draft. They didn't protect him. They let a lot of guys be exposed in expansion. The moves they're making doesn't exactly make you think that they're not rebuilding, but they could do a quick reset if they can get their hands on a couple of really good players. But in my opinion, they still have some real bad contracts like Johansson and Duchesne, which are problematic really for moving the team too much forward. So I don't know what they're going to do there. They got Philip Forsberg on a 1-year deal. They have to decide what's going on there. I know he was not happy after they traded Arvidsson. Even comments on social media indicated that. So they have to determine his future if he's going to sign and stay. Same with Matthias Ekholm. They're going to want to see some improvements, and bringing a guy like Hamilton would be a big way to show that. And apparently they are expected to be in the mix when it comes to landing him. But I wouldn't rule out going back to Carolina after being able to talk to other teams. It is believed that he will continue with more dialogue there, and there is a chance that they could up the contract offer and try their best to keep him. At least that's what some people are saying right now within the Hurricane circle. So we'll remain to be seen on that one. Ryan Suter apparently has it narrowed down to 2 teams, being the Dallas Stars and the New York Islanders. It looks like he may or may not be playing with Zach Parise next year. Many expect Parise to be going to the Islanders, but there are reports that the Dallas Stars might be prepared to offer Suter a 4-year deal. To me, that's a little bit too much term for a player that was just bought out. I don't know what kind of dollar figure we're talking here yet, but as much as I believe Ryan Suter can still be a very capable top 4 guy who can play a good amount of minutes, that's just a lot of commitment for this kind of player, in my opinion. I think teams were hoping to get him on a shorter term deal, 1 to 2 years for a couple $1 million, considering he still has big paychecks coming from Minnesota. So we'll see. But Dallas and the Islanders are reportedly the last 2 in the mix to land him. Jaden Schwartz has been talking to the Seattle Kraken and did so during their exclusive period and will continue to talk dialogue as they head into Wednesday. It's also believed that the Colorado Avalanche could be very much a player for Schwartz's services too. That's the most likely 2 landing spots for him, and of course that's mainly because they might be losing Gabe Landeskog. They're continuing to have conversations with their captain, but things are not really progressing. But the fact that they're still talking gives you a little bit of hope and optimism that they may be able to get something worked out. Same goes for Philip Grubauer, the Vezina-nominated goaltender for them, also a pending UFA, and there doesn't seem to be a ton of movement there. So it's quite possible both guys can hit the open market on Wednesday, and the Avalanche don't seem too stressed here. They seem to be okay with losing both guys, so it'll be interesting to see what they have planned and how they're going to go about replacing them should they end up leaving. I mean, I know Landeskog's been linked to the Blues, so Schwartz, obviously could get priced out of there, and he could end up kind of swapping teams if that ends up being the case. Looks as though there's a decent chance Ryan Getzlaf may actually leave the Anaheim Ducks. I mean, they could still work out a deal with Bob Murray, but at this point, they're nowhere close to a contract extension, and it is believed that Getzlaf at this point is open to leaving and will test the free agent market on Wednesday. Apparently, a couple of teams that have been reaching out, trying to gain interest here, are the Nashville Predators and the Boston Bruins. I would think if the Bruins sign Getzlaf, that's a sign that David Krejci's not coming back. You would think that they'd want an answer from Krejci before making a big decision like that. However, Getzlaf could very well be that similar type of player that could replace him, but I don't know. It's hard to say that he'll have the exact chemistry with Taylor Hall like Krejci did. but it is a team that's in the mix there. I'm sure the Bruins are trying to do their due diligence here to consider life without Krejci and what they need to do to replace him should he not return. But, is Getzlaf the right answer? I guess only time will tell. Nashville, like I said, is also an interesting place there. I mean, they have some cap space to work with now after making the moves that they've done. They could probably get him on a fairly inexpensive contract. Hard to say how cheap, but Nashville's a place that a lot of players like to play. Obviously, they have some other top centers there like Duchesne and Johansson. And it really boils down to Getzlaf if he wants to chase another Stanley Cup ring, or what does he want to do? Because if he really wants to chase that, I'm not sure that Nashville's really the place to go. Boston could be an interesting choice for him. There will be other teams interested in the Ducks captain too, but it's going to be interesting just to see him going to free agency for the first time in his career, mind you, and actually have a chance to leave the Ducks. Montreal Canadiens center Phillip Danault is generating a lot of interest on the free agent market as well. Many feel there's a really, really high probability that he leaves Montreal. I reported the other day that there was a good chance that the LA Kings were going to show a fair bit of interest, and that seems to be consistent from what I've seen in other reports, but there's other teams as well that are reportedly interested in talking to Danault once free agency officially opens up. And one of those teams could also be the New York Rangers. Now, the Rangers are a team that's been heavily rumored into Jack Eichel, and I think Phillip Danault, even though they're a very different kind of player, is kind of like a plan B, so to speak. There's a lot of rumors about Ryan Strome being traded, and if they do trade Strome, they're definitely going to need a center, and if Eichel's not coming via trade, they're going to have to do something else, and this could be the way to go. They have Mika Zibanejad, who can be your top offensive center, and Phillip Danault can be your top defensive center. So it's not an entirely bad move, but it obviously boils down to the price tag and what kind of contract they're going to end up giving him. But, you mentioned him playing on a line with a guy like Barclay Goodrow, for example. Maybe they could make up that third line, too. It's really hard to say. Going to boil down to money, but the Rangers, as well as the Kings and a few other teams, are certainly heavily interested in Danault, and it sounds like he's going to probably price himself out of Montreal, as the odds of returning are pretty slim at this point based on what Montreal media is indicating here. One other free agent player to keep an eye on as well is Luke Schenn. Of course, multiple Stanley Cup champion now with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Appears likely to be headed to Vancouver. The Canucks certainly need to address their blue line as well. They acquired Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They're trying to trade Nate Schmidt, which we're going to talk about a little bit further here in a moment. And Schenn could be a replacement player to be like that third pair, number 6-7 guy. Certainly, kind of carved out a decent career for himself being a depth player after being a very high draft pick by the Maple Leafs, and kind of by many being considered a bit of a draft bust. But considering he was labeled out fairly early in his Leafs tenure, like I said, he's managed to stick around the league, get some Stanley Cups to his name as well. So he could be a nice experienced piece to head to Vancouver on a fairly cheap contract. Now, before we jump into the trade talk for today, I want to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping into all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. Thanks for watching that promotional video. I greatly appreciate it. Now, getting into today's trade talk. We talked a lot about free agents. Now, what kind of moves might we see here in the coming days? Well, it's hard to say how close or how far away we are from seeing a Jack Eichel trade with the Buffalo Sabres, but at this point, it's starting to get the impression that the New York Rangers, who are one of the team's front runners to land this guy, is pretty much out of it at this point. Not to say that they couldn't circle back and get back in. A lot of teams have been doing that, hoping that the requested offer to make the deal will change, and at some point it probably will. But as a real sticking point for the Rangers was not being able to include Nils Lundqvist or Braden Schneider. They seem to be really against that. I had heard a few weeks ago that Lundqvist was a piece they really didn't want to trade. I wasn't sure they felt the exact same way about Schneider when it comes to a Jack Eichel trade. I can understand not trading him for just anything, But to land a top center like Eichel, I thought Schneider would be a player that they would be willing to include. I figured they'd want to include a roster player or two to offset some of the money. Maybe like a Buchnevich, who's now been traded to St. Louis. And then you've got guys like maybe Georgiev, who the Sabres needed a goalie. Maybe a guy like Hedel. Hard to say what else would go to Buffalo, but obviously some other picks and prospects. Younger players. Looks as though the Rangers don't want to really give up a lot of their future. And certainly they're at a standstill here with Buffalo. They can't really agree on the price. So for right now, it looks like they might be, like I said, obviously interested in Danault. So they're kind of going in another direction here. If we do see them make another move regarding a center, that's just going to really signify for sure that they're out on Eichel. But I also seen reports as well that they would prefer to trade him west, which makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't be shocked, again, to see teams like the Ducks and the Kings get back into the mix. Calgary's been in and out a lot, too. I'm really not entirely convinced Calgary has the pieces, though. Minnesota's another team. Been in and out. It's really hard to say how this is going to go. The Sabres seem to be very, very patient here, which you understand to a degree. But there's a lot of pressing needs here heading into free agency. A lot of these teams, if they don't get Eichel or they don't think they're going to get Eichel, they're going to go spend their money elsewhere, and it's really going to handcuff the Sabres on where they can trade this guy. So if they don't get a deal done here in the next few days, it's just going to get that much tougher. And until that price changes, teams just don't seem to be willing to bite and give the Sabres what they're looking for. So it's really hard to say where things stand, but right now we're no closer to an Eichel trade, and a team like the Rangers really seem to be out of it at this point. Now, we saw the Winnipeg Jets make a trade last night for defenseman Brendan Dillon. Apparently, they've been really trying hard to acquire Nate Schmidt from Vancouver. This is likely their plan B here, so I'd imagine they won't pursue him anymore. And actually, it wasn't working out anyway, because Nate Schmidt does have a partial no-trade clause. He can block 10 teams, and it looks as though the Jets are on that list, so he would not consider waiving it. He's been asked multiple times, apparently. The Jets have inquired multiple times, and they could not get anything completed. So obviously that's likely not going to happen, but the Canucks are still pushing hard to trade the defenseman. Like I said, they obviously got Ekman Larsson on the mix now. They're rumored to be signing Luke Schenn, and they really need Schmidt's cap hit to go to free things up. I would suspect, based on what their roster construction is looking like here, they're probably looking for a less expensive forward in return, maybe a draft pick or something to that effect. But we've seen the defense market kind of be set now. A lot of similar, paid defensemen like Ristolainen. We saw Brendan Dillon go. There's other guys too. So there's a good idea of what the market is set for now for these type of D. I don't know exactly where Schmidt would prefer to play. Obviously not in Vancouver. And like I said, he only has a 10-team trade blockage here on his contract, so there's a lot of teams that they can move him to, but he does come with a fairly hefty price tag, and this is not going to be an easy deal for the Canucks to navigate, but they're still working on it to try to free up that cap space. Now, the Boston Bruins are having a lot of talks with the Seattle Kraken. As I reported the other day, those talks seem to continue, and it appears to be around a left-shot defenseman. It's not clear exactly who it is, but there are many that think Vince Dunn is the Bruins' target. Now, it may not be the guy that the Kraken are preferring to trade here, but if you look at the guys that are likely a given to be on opening night roster on the blue line for the Kraken, you get Mark Giordano, who's likely going to be the first captain for the franchise. They signed Alexiak and Larson, so you got Giordano and Alexiak are both left shot D, so they're bound to be 2 out of your 3 guys in the opening night. Larson will be one of your guys on the right side on opening night, and you still have a plethora of defensemen that you picked up in the expansion draft, many of which are NHL caliber guys that really are not going to end up going to the minors. They're going to end up either being on the roster or traded. Now, who else could be that left shot D to play in that other third role with the Kraken? It could be a variety of guys. They have Hayden Fleury as well as his brother Cale. They could even possibly be a pairing because one's a lefty, one's a righty. They have other guys too, not to mention some guys that could be moved like a Curtis McDermott, a Carson Soucy, or a Vince Dunn. So Vince Dunn might be the most appealing to many teams if they want a puck mover. But if you want a big, strong, physical defenseman, McDermott and Soucy are absolute monsters back there, who are both over around 6'5", 220 to 30 pounds. Like, they're big physical D. So depending on what you want will determine what they kind of would be willing to do here. But to me, it sounds like the Bruins want a puck mover, so it makes sense that Dunn's their target. It's not quite clear, though, if the Kraken do intend to for sure move him, even though many feel they will. Obviously, if you look at the 3 that I mentioned that are for sure going to be in their lineup, you don't really get a lot of puck movement there. Obviously, amongst Giordano, Alexiak, and Larson, you don't really have a more mobile, offensively gifted D there. Giordano still has some offensive upside, but how long will he be there? It's hard to say, whereas Dunn's way younger and could be a part of their future. So, guys like Susie or McDermott could also be on that roster and really be part of a big, bruising, large-size Kraken decor for this season. They may not win a lot of games because we don't know who's going to score the goals yet, given that they have other moves they need to make in trade and free agency here. But at this point, like I said, they could be hard to play against in that aspect. So we'll see what they do. But Dunn in the Bruins is a potential thing that many think are being discussed. And lastly here, Tyler Bertuzzi, still a player getting a lot of attention in Detroit. There's apparently no real signs of contract extension talks between the Red Wings and the player. So it looks pretty likely that he does end up getting traded. They'll leave his new team up to figure out that next contract. There's lots of teams in the mix. Like I said, LA's kind of had their hand in a lot of things, so they really want to add another top six forward. So there is that aspect that had been linked there before, but there's other teams too. Bertuzzi's getting a variety of interest from around the league. Hard to say exactly where he ends up at this point, but the Red Wings seem pretty intent on moving on from him here before the offseason's up. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's trade and free agent rumors. Like I said, we're only just over 24 hours away from free agent frenzy, which is a little weird to have it so late into the summer here. But given the season and all the adjusted calendar here that we've had to deal with, this is what we have. So it's going to be a short and condensed, crazy offseason that we're well into here that we already knew was going to come, and it's going to continue a little while before the news cycle kind of starts to calm down a bit. So stay with us here at Top Shelf Hockey. We will keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. So if you're new, make sure you subscribe and stick around so you don't miss any future content. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.